Alright, welcome back to the channel. The theme of today's video will be, can you be too BPS or too biopsychosocial? And the short answer is no, but there's a bit to unpack, because one thing I will say about the BPS lens or the BPS framework is it's a pretty complex concept to digest and apply to everything you do. So while I can have some respect for this sentiment that, oh, the pendulum swung so far with this BPS stuff, even that really comes from a misunderstanding of what BPS and a biopsychosocial approach truly means. Anyway, in between yapping about that, I'm going to be blasting my arms, and I've actually made some changes to one of my arm days. So historically, I was opening all my arm days with JM press and just getting into some sort of cable tricep extension, biasing the shortened position after that. I'm just subbing out one of those JM press slots for some overhead tricep work, which has been a bit of a contentious topic, especially if you pay attention to those science-based lunatics. They don't seem to be able to get their story straight about, is this a waste of time due to active insufficiency, or is it extremely based? Is it S tier? I'm just hedging my bets by just making sure I include some overhead tricep work. All right, so what the hell is the biopsychosocial model? Well, it was a new, medical framework that was theorized by an American psychiatrist known as George Engel, and he wrote his first paper on it in 1973. So the biopsychosocial model was intended as a departure from biomedicalism. And I guess another way of explaining biomedicalism simply is thinking about the body as a machine. You know, any sort of injury or illness was only really thought about in terms of the physical structures of our body, with no care given to our thoughts, beliefs, expectations about any given scenario. And even though a lot of these conversations and frameworks trickle down through medicine, we can look at medical and rehab and then even training examples of all of these perspectives. So again, biomedical, very simple and straightforward. It's like, all right, there's the problem, cut it out of them. Whereas BPS, it's a little bit more holistic. It's like, well, yeah, we've got to cut that thing out of them, but let's make sure that they're bought into the treatment plan. Let's make sure that they can get visits from their loved ones. Maybe they need some counseling as well before they go through this harrowing treatment. Maybe in rehab, we've got someone who's returned from an ACL surgery. So they ruptured their ACL playing sport, they've opted for surgery, but then they've never really come back. Again, the physical structures have healed, but we actually see this in a lot of ACL return to sport. There's a lot of hesitancy with loading the knee. Even though the structures have completely healed, I guess you could say sort of the mind hasn't healed, or again, the athlete just has such negative thoughts, beliefs, and expectations about their knee, they're not the same athlete. And more of a biopsychosocial approach to, I guess, performance, you would look at, instead of just looking at the research to find, what's the most optimal glute exercise? Is it squats or hip thrusts? A biopsychosocial approach would encourage you to consider your client's thoughts, beliefs, and expectations, because if they really like one of those exercises, they're probably going to train it way harder anyway, and that's going to make far more of a difference than just whichever one of them is supposedly more S tier than the other, with this supposed pendulum swing that the biopsychosocial model has caused in the fitness industry. Probably the biggest contention about adopting a more biopsychosocial approach in the fitness industry, especially with personal trainers and physios and things like that, a lot of people who haven't adopted this biopsychosocial lens, they think that when you say biopsychosocial, that you do not give a shit about biomechanics. Not that it's the biomechanics psychosocial model, but again, that B sort of, you'd put that under the biology banner of the BPS model. And I would say that this is another misnomer as well, like thinking about the biopsychosocial model as these three different spheres. People will often depict the biopsychosocial model crudely as this Venn diagram where the bio, the psycho, and the social just barely overlap one another. But this is really just for illustrative purposes. In reality, all of those circles should be pushed over each other as much as possible, because when you're practicing a truly biopsychosocial approach, you realize there's no separation between any of these entities. So as far as this whole idea that the biopsychosocial model has been too much of a pendulum swing, and now people just think that how you move doesn't matter, biomechanics doesn't mean anything. This couldn't be further from the truth. The biopsychosocial model isn't a rejection of biology or biomechanics whatsoever. It's in the name, biopsychosocial. We even start with that. What it really is an acknowledgement of the importance and the impact of psychosocial factors on health and performance outcomes. In my opinion, the biopsychosocial approach, or the people who are uncomfortable with the biopsychosocial approach, they're the ones that really enjoy this idea of a coach being this all-knowing guru. Whereas the biopsychosocial approach, I mean, when you're acknowledging the importance of psychosocial factors, you can't get that information from a textbook like you can with biomechanics. You actually have to have a decent relationship with your clients. You have to give a fuck about their opinions on things. It forces you in general to be much more collaborative with your approach. So another way of calling it a BPS approach, you could just call it a collaborative approach or the hero's journey. So typically the trainers who are still placing all their emphasis on biomechanics, like that's where all their upskill goes, that's where all their advertisement of them being an expert to get their clients is just on, oh, how much they know their biomechanics. I think a lot of these coaches are attached to this idea of being this all-knowing guru that doesn't have to listen or collaborate with their clients. It's just like, yeah, come here, what's your problem? Move your body like this and then everything will be better. And it's just, yeah, it's a bit of bullshit, quite frankly. Who are listening to all this BPS stuff, they're like, oh, right, yeah, how you move matters, but clients' thoughts, beliefs, expectations have a huge impact on things. So work collaboratively with my client, come up with a plan that they believe in as well, that has enough respect for the principles of training, you know, not worrying about things that are optimized from a purely textbook sense, but finding that sweet spot where we're in that bandwidth of good enough and our client really loves and believes in the approach and the program. That's all a biopsychosocial approach is. BPS kind of gets strawmanned the same way movement optimism gets strawmanned, where people are like, oh, you just don't give a shit about the way that your clients move. No, I just don't want to scare the shit out of my client for not moving the same way as someone moves in a biomechanics textbook. It means that we consider those things in amongst everything. Any of those science-based wankers who talk about, you know, optimal programming, optimal exercises for hypertrophy or strength, all of those people are completely clueless when it comes to understanding a biopsychosocial approach, because once you've digested this framework, you realize the only way you get to optimization is by collaborating with your client, not by like thinking about the degrees of flexion and extension or internal or external rotation or the external stability of an exercise. And again, I'm not rejecting those things. All those things do matter a little bit, but what really leads to the optimal program is where you can find those constraints or boundaries of good enough and the things that will provide your client with results. And then you work out the optimal intervention by presenting your client with a range of options and be like, which one of these do you think is the best one? Because that combination of you as a coach knowing that the intervention on a biological level is good enough to do the job, and then the client, you're factoring in their thoughts, beliefs, expectations, and preferences, boom, then you've got an optimal biopsychosocial approach to training, rehab, performance, or fucking whatever. Adopting a more biopsychosocial approach has been one of the most paradigm shifting things for me as a coach when it comes to not only getting better results, but also just making the process so much more enjoyable for both myself and my clients. If you want to learn more about things like this, as well as ideas like dynamic systems theory and how they impact your decision-making process as a coach, check out GPP Level 1 below. We unpack all these concepts in detail. There's a community chat, there's 2 times a week, weekly video calls and things like that. Highly recommend it. There's a link for that down below. One of the most important things to acknowledge about a more biopsychosocial approach is it shouldn't really change what you do with your clients. It should change how you view what you're doing with your clients. So just understanding that you can't interact with any of these things in isolation. Maybe in the physio world, people would say that, oh, manual therapy, that's not BPS. You know, you're just trying to manipulate the actual tissues and the structures. But there's so much positive research on, I think, what we sort of call compassionate touch and therapeutic alliance. So things like manual therapy or manipulating the biomechanics of an exercise, these are absolutely biopsychosocial interventions, and you should view them that way. It's always framed that BPS is this rejection of biomechanics when it really enhances the way you view your biomechanical interventions. So even though ideas or concepts like the biopsychosocial model or even things like dynamic systems theory, they can be a fair bit to wrap your head around, when you actually get to the practical implementation of it, often it's very simple. So, you know, doing a lot of hard thinking on the front end when you're developing your training model leads to easier decision making down the line and really, really simple stuff. Because yeah, like all it's saying at the end of the day is like respect how your clients feel about things and just be a little bit more collaborative. I mean, if anything, biopsychosocial lens just gives me more confidence on a highly individualized approach to training and things like that. Whereas I think a lot of coaches get a lot of sort of silly secondhand interpretations of the biopsychosocial model and what that actually means for our decision-making process as a coach, or what sort of things we do or don't do with our clients. I'm so bad at remembering to hit record. I just hit a PR set of hammer curls. I hammer curled the 17.5s for 6 reps. 5 good reps. The 6th one was a little bit dodgy. I've been trying to really take like a strength progression focused approach to growing my arms. I always got insecure that I was ego lifting because I'd see guys with like way bigger pipes than me, you know, curling the 10s and the 12s, and I mean, I don't know. I started to realize that my arms are definitely a weak point in my physique, but I'm like, if I get to the point where I'm hammer curling the 20s for like clean sets of 8, surely they have to be bigger than 12 inches. If I can keep my body weight going up, obviously, at the same time. Another thing that a BPS lens or framework will help you understand better is why some programs that look a bit stupid or maybe just suboptimal on paper produce outstanding results for certain individuals. And a lot of the time, what you're missing there is just personal context. Whether it's just preferences or whether it's weird beliefs about exercises or strange motivations or things like that, none of those things are gonna make sense when they're removed from the context of that individual and shown to another coach. So yeah, the BPS lens for me has been something that's actually maybe a lot less snobby about the way people write their programs. All I'm really interested in is, are you getting good results with it? Because a lot of programs won't make sense to people on paper unless they really have a good understanding of that athlete or whoever the program was actually designed for. All right, that's enough ranting for one day. So yeah, don't freak out when you hear BPS. It doesn't mean that it's a rejection of biomechanics or anything like that. It's just acknowledging things in addition to how we move or just the biology or our physical structures. When you hear BPS, all I want you to think is just individualization and giving a fuck about your client's thoughts, beliefs, and expectations. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And if you're interested in unpacking more of these complex frameworks and successfully applying them to your coaching and getting better results with your clients, check out GPP Level 1. It's the best course in the industry. There's a link for that down below. Anyway, I'll see you in a few days with another video.